Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis all over. Welcome back. We are reading 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 5 verses today. I think I've clustered it out correctly because the next 3 verses after this are all around the theme of day. How long the day of Brahma, how long is our day, and time. And these verses today are also all similar, but you could maybe put the last verse in with the next one. I think I could have done it a little better, but anyway, it still seems to be 3 or 4 verses per cluster on average. So when one of them is 5, I'm not too worried at all. See, we've got a new backdrop, so I'm not doing any virtual background today. I've got my custom-made Alex phone bag from my Christian auntie friend and from krishnastore.com, imported all the way from the US to Korea, is Sri Krishna himself, who now lives on my wall. So great to see those lovely colors and lovely Maharupa every day. Jai. The definitive English edition of Bhagavad Gita as it is, deluxe edition. Please join me in honoring this great work, or not. You can fast forward through this part if you're listening to a recording, which I will do myself if I ever hear these again myself. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All right, first we will read 12 through 16, the literal English translation by H.D. Goswami. Here we go. Restraining all bodily gates, fixing mind in heart, and placing life air at head's top, one stands on the yoga platform, sounding the absolute as the single syllable Om, and steadily remembering me. One then departs the body and attains the highest destination, Partha. I am easy to attain for the ever-linked yogi who always remembers me with ever unswerving mind. Reaching me, great souls never return to birth in this transient realm of sorrow, for they have gone to final perfection. All realms, from earth to even Brahma's abode, are places from which one must return. But on reaching me, Kaunteya, one is never born again. That's it. That sounded really great. Interestingly, it seems that H.D. Goswami also is clustering verses in a particular way. So chapter 8, the first 2 is a cluster, then 3 and 4, then 5, 6, and 7, then 8, 9, and 10, and then 11, 12, 13, and then 14, 15, 16. It's paragraphed. So verse 17, which we'll do next time, is indented. There's 17. Those that rightly know day and night, that's what we do next week. And 17, 18, 19 seem to be the next cluster, according to how it's organized here. And I don't think that's just how it's formatted on my Kindle. I think that's actually how the book is designed. And then there's 3 after that, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The final one in the chapter. The final cluster is 6 verses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Was there anything worthy of noting there? Yeah, if you were watching me, you notice I put the quotes mark because in the very first verse we read, restraining all bodily gates, the word bodily is in brackets. Not exactly sure what brackets means. Prabhupada, which we're going to read in a second, translates it as like sensory enjoyment or sensory gratification. So sensory and bodily is probably the same word, and it's probably in Sanskrit. I'm guessing it's in brackets because H.D. Goswami is stressing that the importance is not on the fact that they are bodily gates, but just the fact that they're gates in any way, and they should be restrained. The verb restrain is probably the stress in that verse for Krishna. And I mean, in that phrase, because that verse has a few phrases. The next one, fixing mind and heart, placing life air at head's top. So there's 3 separate activities which are all important. And bodily being in brackets, to me, indicates a lesser importance, but at the same time, it must be noted. All right, let's get some Prabhupada. 12. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. So it's actually just 2 words in Sanskrit, sarva dvarani, which Prabhupada says means all the doors of the body. And H.D. Goswami says bodily gates. Same thing. Yep, but I don't know how to actually translate it even more detailed than that. So I can't say why bodily is in brackets. But it is included in both translations, so I have no choice but to conclude that that's what it means. But what is important or not, I mean, maybe that's the difference in which translation you read. So my main note I added here is that, the stress from this verse is complete detachment, a very extreme kind of detachment from the physical senses, and that is the physical world. And that's how you know we're dealing with an Eastern practice, an Eastern wisdom tradition. And I'm not saying Western traditions say, oh, just, we love the world. The world is great. There's no problems with the world. But it's more that, at least in the Abrahamic faiths, the congregation, the church, the temple, there's more, which are material things, basically. But those are, a more important aspect of spiritual life. But Krishna says, forget it all, basically. Kind of like what Buddha says, too. It's, and a lot of the Eastern sages, even Confucius, I don't think he would, I don't know, I can't remember, and I don't know at all for certain, but I would guess he wasn't proposing strong attachments to family, to boss, to comrade, to administrator to judge and all the different social roles, which is the main aspect of Confucianism, is like your social life and political life. But it's not about being political. It's about having a genuine love for those people and a genuine respect for the position that they have, more than being, like attached to them. It's about, I think it's about loving from a place of virtue, and it's the virtue, the impersonal virtue that you attach to more than the actual person. I'm basically guessing that's how Confucius described it. I do remember there's one word for virtue, like a kind of humanity, kind of benevolent humanity that you can practice and share with all of your relationships. Anyway, I would really like to study Confucius more, but I have not. Very short purport here, although it seems to be, to me, quite an interesting verse. But Prabhupada, once again, is really stressing that this whole yogic practice, complete detachment, closing the gates of the body, fixing prana at the top of the head, this whole thing is just not possible. In this age, it's just, nope, don't even try. I think that's one of the main reasons it's such a short purport. It's a hint. Prabhupada is, letting you know, just, don't ignore it, but like understand that like you're not going to be able to do this. And even if you can, it's not recommended. There's a better way, which is chanting Hare Krishna, doing Krishna Bhakti, and remembering, listening, hearing, whatever, however you do it. There's many, many different transcendental forms of the Lord you can worship. He mentions that in one of the future purports in this cluster. But the interesting thing is what Prabhupada says word for word is, it is, quote, very easy for him to remain in an undisturbed transcendental trance or in samadhi, unquote. And Prabhupada's talking about one who is able to fix his mind on Krishna in devotional service. Very easy. Not just easy, very easy. We can speculate, is Prabhupada exaggerating or not exaggerating, but that doesn't change the fact that he chose those words, very easy. He didn't say difficult or very difficult or neutral or easy. He said very easy. And that's the most significant part of this whole verse and purport to me, actually. Just do Krishna Bhakti, which is very simple, very pure. Any child can do it. Anyone can do it. Cripples can do it. And anyone can do it. The intellectually disabled, anyone can do it. 13. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. Now, quit his body, that's in the literal and colloquial translation. I totally forget what it was in H.D. Goswami's translation. He said, departs the body. Much the same. Little different. Oh. Yeah, very similar, but a little different. Yeah. Quitting the body and departing the body are interesting because they both presuppose that there is a soul living in the body that is choosing to then go somewhere else. Choosing via departing, like, oh, this stop is done, on to my next journey somewhere else. Or quitting the body is a bit more strongly leaving, kind of like, quitting a job. It's like, I'm done. I quit. Goodbye. Um, so I prefer quitting the body. I like how it's stronger and more to the point. Um, but also depart the body is also a beautiful phrase in English that brings agency to the soul, which for secular cultures and English language in general, you don't have that with words like pass away or death. It just seems like a horrible thing that just happens to you. Oh, and obviously that's why people get all scared of it. If instead you use terms like quit the body and depart the body in the same way, and if you use those words like depart the same way you'd use it in other contexts, like, I am done with Korea, I shall now depart for China, or whatever it is. I am done with this body, I shall now depart for another one. It becomes much more natural and peaceful and enlightened of a process to engage in. Language matters. This is the um, operating system of our consciousness. So even if, like me, you're speaking English and I would describe it stupid language, you can still use it in a smart way with smart words, which may not even be from English or maybe from foreign cultures, but there's not everything that's lost in translation. A lot of it will translate through and it will have an effect. If you just erase the word death from your vocabulary and you completely replace it with phrases like quitting the body or departing the body, that's actually that's one of the main signs that you're actually a devotee, that you're actually a sincere reader and practitioner of the Bhagavad Gita. That's how we know that we are really buying in to the philosophy and really, to be better said, living the Gita, actually living it, as opposed to, perhaps just doing a live stream once a week, which is what, I'm not saying that's the only thing I'm doing, but, or reading it once a week or whatever practice you might have. If it's just a ritualized practice, and you're still using words like, oh, death, and it's scary and blah, blah, it means you haven't gotten it yet, basically. Not guaranteed, but there's a good chance that if your language doesn't change, maybe you're not there yet. Now, another really small purport here, and the first two sentences are quite significant. Prabhupada states, quote, "It is clearly stated here that Om, Brahman, and Lord Krishna are not different. The impersonal sound of Krishna is Om, but the sound Hare Krishna contains Om," unquote. So that second sentence, I'm not sure what to make of it. Because it's the second sentence and then the first one, Prabhupada says that they're all the same. He's probably means it in the absolute sense, not in a literal sense or linguistic sense where there's some sound. Like you can literally find the word Om inside Hare Krishna. I tried to do that as I was preparing for this, but I don't think there's there's the in Om for sure, but there's no M. So obviously I don't think we can take it literally. But yeah, it is Brahma, the absolute, and Om, they are connected. And then Mam, Krishna says me. So Brahma, me, and Om, Omkara, are all the same. And I'm reading the word for word translation now. And anyone who remembers this quits the body and achieves the supreme. So, yeah, and it's exactly what Prabhupada states immediately in the purport. These are all the same entity, they are not different. And of course, Prabhupada being Bhakti Vedanta Swami, in the line coming from Lord Chaitanya, who published this book in 1972, yada yada. Of course, we'll say after that while chanting Om is great, it's certainly better to chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, and then you'll reach the spiritual planets. The impersonalists will probably remain in the Brahma Jyoti. That's pretty much it. On to verse 14. For one who remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Purta, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So I found this to be a rather obvious and boring verse, but really long purport here. Definitely the longest in this cluster. I really like the second paragraph, which kind of contradicts the Nectar of Devotion. I think one of the many verses in Nectar of Devotion says that, one of the things a devotee should do, they should live in Vrindavan Dham or one of the other dhams in India. That's like basically a requirement. It's one of the many requirements that's listed alongside doing deity worship and everything else. I mean, there's so many things, right? But Prabhupada basically says a pure devotee is Krishna conscious all the time, and thus for a pure devotee, Vrindavan is wherever he is. In that sense, Vrindavan is anywhere. A pure devotee can be in any time and place and create the atmosphere of Vrindavan by his devotional service. And it was Sri Advaita who told Lord Chaitanya, quote, "Wherever you are, O Lord, there is Vrindavan," unquote. And there should be no impediments. A pure devotee, the special qualification of that is he's always thinking of Krishna without considering the time or place. There's another contradiction there. It's a paradox. It's an apparent contradiction. It's not an actual contradiction, but I'm thinking of the dress code issue, and Prabhupada, was a genius at time and place and constantly readjusting to get the preaching to be as good as possible. Oh, Boston's no good. Okay, let's go to New York. Oh, New York's not cool anymore. Okay, let's go to LA, San Francisco, whatever. Like he was constantly adjusting perfectly to the time and place. Oh, so you kids like rock shows? Okay, I'll do like a talk in the rock show. And everything was perfect. So according to this verse, my imagination of what's happening, it's not just imagination, there's logic to it, is that, Prabhupada is in trance about serving Krishna, and, his eyes and ears are open. And when one of his disciples who's in tune with the culture, with the time and place, says, "Oh no, let's go over here to this other place. It's better." Then Prabhupada can simply look at his disciple. Is he being sincere? Does he know what he's talking? Yes. Is it worth, taking a risk to do that? Yes. We shall do that. If it doesn't work, then we'll do something else. But the point here though is that Krishna comes first, time and place comes second. And this is why I still back up H.D. Goswami and what he does, because if for him and for me and for many others, when you do think of Krishna first, and you see so many people in the West who just will not be able to follow because of all this crazy, not crazy, but the super Hinduzation of ISKCON, like most people just are not ready at all. It's not at all practical to like wear tilak or dhoti or, I mean, many other things. It's a huge, strong gate that prevents people from joining. And if you really want to give them Krishna, you'll have compassion, and from that compassion and desire to bring Krishna, then comes the secondary thing of like, oh, all right, well, like, what can we change? Like, so HD Goswami's mentioned, well, actually, we should have a dress code, like a uniform. Like, so, hey, we know where, and then like maybe there's like a Krishna West uniform. Like this is a great idea, but until we actually have and we have agreement on it, like, I don't know, we don't have that yet. But and it's secondary. That's why it hasn't happened yet, because the more important thing first is to educate people on how this stuff actually works, and also by shining light on how Prabhupada did this and how Prabhupada was so perfect at this. Because Prabhupada is an acharya, he's following exactly what we read here in this purport. One thing I'm not sure about is oh no, this is the next verse I'm thinking of. But in the last paragraph, Prabhupada mentions the 5 primary ways to do bhakti: as a neutral bhakta, as a servant, as a friend, as a parent, and as a conjugal lover. And so there's 5 different ways, but however you do it, a pure devotee is always engaged in the Supreme Lord, the service of the Lord, and cannot forget the Supreme Lord. Cannot forget. Can try to forget and will fail. That's what cannot forget means. So for him, the Lord is easily attained. And of course, not of course, but also similarly, the Supreme Lord cannot forget his pure devotee. This is the great blessing of the Krishna conscious process of chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna. And the first paragraph is all about don't do it for personal gain. Oh, yeah, no, it is in this purport. It says the preceding verses mention 4 different kinds of devotees: the distressed, the inquisitive, those who seek material gain, and speculative philosophers. So I went through the preceding verses and I didn't see the exact connection there. Could see it a little bit, but ultimately it doesn't matter, because then it also, in the Gita, we've already talked about karma yoga, jnana yoga, and so on. But what's actually mentioned in this verse, and that could be why there's such a long purport, is because the interesting thing that Krishna is now saying explicitly and stressing is that one should do bhakti yoga without mixing it with anything else. Simply constant engagement in devotional service. Oh, sorry, I went somewhere else. Just thinking of my Bible course people. They offended me a little bit yesterday. Not so much, not in a way that I care about it all, but they're getting offensive towards the Gita and Hinduism, and they're too dead set on their own ways. I don't expect anything different, but I don't know how it's going to work. We'll see. I do want to understand Revelation because there's no way you can understand it by yourself. It's shrouded in mystery. That's for sure. I tried to explain it yesterday that these Abrahamic faiths are designed for the really depraved, sinful people who simply like you can't give them a Gita because they'll as they read they'll lie to themselves and but he said that but he really means it like they can't get something as it is. They're not clean enough. And not just intellectual, it's like an ego thing, conditioning thing, an ego thing, and so on. But like when you have something wrapped up in a fun little mystery puzzle, works really well. Okay, let's go. Let's move on. 15. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. My summary of this verse is simply this: devotion is that which can and does necessarily, when you do it correctly, transcend the temporary. Other things can as well, but bhakti will by necessity transcend the temporary, transcend misery, transcend suffering, transcend reincarnation, and so on, because it simply means linking yourself to that thing which is transcendent of everything else. So, of course, it'll work. It has to work. It can't not work. The only way it does not work is if you don't do it correctly or if you don't do it enough. It's like if your friend tells you basketball is the most fun sport in the world and you have no experience in any sports and you try basketball for 10 minutes and you're like, well, this is really boring and hard, and then you give up. Who made the mistake? Is your friend wrong and actually it's not the most fun sport? Well, maybe, but in that circumstance, no. He is not at fault at all. You are at fault for not really trying, not sincerely trying, not trying enough. In that situation, you would be at fault. Likewise, let's use the basketball example again. Let's say you do basketball, you study basketball for 15 hours, but you never put a basketball in your hand. You just watch documentaries and videos and highlight reels of basketball. And then you say, wow, you're right. Basketball is the most fun sport of them all. But you have no experience. And then but you're invited into the court and you're all puffed up and you think, hey, I'm a basketball guy. I know this stuff through and through. And then you lose and you're humiliated horribly. And then you start blaming the ref or something like that. Once again, you are at fault. In that situation, you are at fault. So if that's how you do bhakti as well, it means you're not doing it properly. And it doesn't mean there's a problem with the bhakti or the guru or the shastra or the sadhu. There's the problem with you. So we have to do it correctly enough to have some result from it. Doesn't have to be complicated or sophisticated because bhakti is quite simple, but there is a level of sincerity and humility, especially those two must be there. I would add hunger to that. If there's 3 cardinal virtues of bhakti, for me, it's be sincere, be humble, and be hungry. Hungry for more. Hungry for more bliss, hungry for more mercy, hungry for more service. This is what hunger means. I'm not sure what the Sanskrit word might be, or even a better English word. Curious, but that's too much of an academic word. Eager, that's a better word. Enthusiastic, that's the word Prabhupada uses, which is even better than eager. But it's, for someone like me, it's also kind of scary. It's also maybe too rajasic. So I kind of like, really? I have to be enthusiastic? Can't I just be like, more curious and eager and like a more detached, sattvic kind of way? That's just my response to it. But as long as there's something like that there, some kind of eagerness, some kind of curiosity, some kind of enthusiasm to go alongside your sincerity and humility, and then you take those 3 virtues and you multiply it across a time frame of a certain number of hours, days, weeks, months, or years. Eventually you'll get a taste and you'll go, wow, this is the highest taste. And then, for instance, whatever eagerness or hunger you have will naturally be heightened. And maybe your humility doesn't heighten. Maybe your sincerity doesn't heighten. Maybe one does, but not the other. But that will all be corrected in time, because the highest taste truly is highest. So when that taste is there, you can't forget it. And you'll find some way to get back to it eventually. I think that could be the structure, the psychological structure for that is the evidence, I guess, or not the evidence, but it's the physics for how Krishna can say any progress one makes on the spiritual path is never forgotten. It could just be because Krishna is just the king of bliss. He's like the most blissful person thing ever, that, and we're just like nectar hungry bliss fiends, that like there's just some part of your soul that will never forget, wow, that was bliss and I want more of that. It's just impossible to forget on a spiritual level. And maybe Krishna himself doesn't have to do, maybe personally he doesn't have to do anything either to like remember, that certain devotee who made that certain progress with him at that certain time. Maybe it's just like a little bright color that like blips on his radar and he goes, oh yeah, that was sweet. And how can you forget the sweet little things? The Mahatmas received transcendental messages from the realized devotees and gradually developed devotional service and Krishna consciousness and become so absorbed they no longer desire elevation to any of the material planets. Nor do they even want to be transferred to any spiritual planet. They only want Krishna's association and nothing else. That's the key to devotion, and that's also that was the purport I was reading, which leads perfectly into verse 16. This water is done. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. All yogis, all kinds of yogis, karma, jnana, hatha, will eventually have to attain perfection in bhakti, Krishna bhakti, before they can go to Krishna Loka and never return. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's almost exactly the same. But basically, what's the idea here? When you are truly devoted spiritually, even the highest heavenly planet is not interesting. Even certain spiritual planets are not interesting. That's it for my notes. Quit out of that. And people on Earth are elevated to higher planets, Brahmaloka, Chandraloka, Indraloka. Eventually, they fall down back to Earth. And you can eventually achieve Brahmaloka. Brahmaloka. Not sure how to pronounce it. But if on that planet you don't cultivate Krishna consciousness, guess what? You have to come back down again. But there are people who are they just keep getting elevated to higher and higher planets. And eventually there's a time of universal devastation. And at that time, they do go to the eternal spiritual kingdom. Brahma and his devotees, who are constantly engaged in Krishna bhakti, are all transferred to the spiritual universe and to specific spiritual planets according to their desires. All right, we're just shy of 45 minutes. It's fine with me. We're going to stop there so I can save my voice. Mostly. Could have a few more things to say, but thank you, Krishna, for joining us, joining me on my wall. Next week, we'll talk about days. We'll do the next verse cluster. There's, I guess, 3 more verse clusters in this chapter. Then we're on to the middle chapter, chapter 9. That's it. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Shri Vaishnava, Jai Shri Vaishnavi all over the world. See you next time.